Alright, so I'm back and I wanted to show you where I'm at with this. So I had my spacer on the model, and then I adapted light cured base plate material to that. And hang on. And so what I did was I adapted it to the model and then cured it. Before I put the sheet over the top, I wanted to make sure that I had each one of the tissue stops filled. So what I did was I used a little bit of scrap material and pressed it into each one of those holes first, and then overlaid over the top of this we'll call it Regi-tray, which is a registration and a tray all-in-one. And again, I'll go back to explaining that in the fact that we do this because we had a compression on the papilla, and we also had some incompletions in the hamular areas. And so I'm going to send this back. We don't want to lose an appointment. We want to be able to move forward. So the doctor will be able to take a bite registration and a new impression at the same appointment. And this knocks out a whole appointment to redo something. Alright, so next step is I'm going to trim these borders so that I take off the vestibular area that is kind of rounded. When I put that base plate material on, I usually push it in and double it over so that it's thicker in these areas for reinforcement, so it stays strong, because the material itself is inherently thin. This is the Primo-Tech base plate material, and it is 1.2 millimeters in thickness, so just a little over a millimeter, and I like to have a little bit more strength along the border, around the periphery. So consequently, that is why I double it over in that area. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and trim this now, and we'll speed up the action a little bit so you don't have to drudge through, but at least you get a chance to see how I do it and what I use and so forth. So the next thing is I got to grab my little suction tunnel here so I don't have to breathe in that dust. I'm going to turn on the vacuum. Okay, so I did some bulk reduction. Just wanted to show you what we do next, or what I do next. And that is I make note of where I have to trim to. And in other words, I know that this area here has to be relieved, and I know that this area here has to be relieved. And I'll just mark those like that, so that when I'm relieving that area, I can see where I'm at. And I'll look around. Oh, you might notice also in this area here, I had some where it locked into this little bit of undercut here. We did pick up some undercut. I want to make sure to relieve that so that when it's being placed in the patient's mouth, that it doesn't scrape the impression material away as it's being seated, excuse me. So with that being said, I'm going to put back on the vacuum, and I'm going to continue to work on this just a little bit more, and then we'll talk a little bit after that. Oh yeah, I got another one here too. And you know, always look at your models to see how they coincide with what you have. Okay. All right, back on it. Okay, so yep, it's a bit of work. I mean, if you want to do these things right, you got to make sure that you don't impinge any of the attachments, and you give enough room inside of this so that when this is removed, which is very simple with a little flaming, the doctor can remove that insert and then fill it with impression material and take the registration and the impression at the same time. But said, there are just still some little things that I had to do. One was to remove this area in here where there was some relief, again, like I said, so it didn't scrape up against the tissue. I had to do that on both sides. I had to do a little bit over here. I had to open up the frenums. Also, I went to the tissue stops and noticed a little bit of flash had crept underneath the spacer, and I wanted to make sure to get rid of that so that when the spacer's pulled out, it doesn't break or it's not hard to get out. Okay. Alright, so there we are, very simply. And then I'll go ahead and the next thing I will put some retention knobs, I'll call them, along the ridge, and then we'll put a rim on that, and we should be good to go. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. And so I wanted to take you through the final steps of the Regitray construction, which is the rim, and give you just a couple little pointers. As you saw earlier, I added those retention knobs on the base plate before I put the rim on, and now I've put the rim on using my friend John's ivory colored rims. I really like these, and not even more importantly, my doctors like them. Shows a little bit of white. Sometimes I get lucky and I can get the pink and white to be at almost the right level when they try them in, but more importantly, when they mark the rim, it gives me a guideline just so that I can see that rim in the mouth, I can see the line, I can see the white and pink delineation. And I go ahead and construct that rim and place it almost identical to the existing denture. This is a new denture for an old denture patient, we'll put it that way. Some things that I did in order to construct that rim correctly was to find and mark the center of the ridge so that I could build the rim from the center out using the pound triangle. I also made sure, I don't know if you can see it, but I've marked the incisive papilla as I mentioned earlier, and then I took and I put a hole through and came through the other side to make sure that the incisive papilla was lingual of the rim, in other words behind the rim, because in nature, of course, teeth are not sitting on top of the incisive papilla, they're in front of this incisive papilla, and I want to mimic that as well in the rim, because I do not want to constrict the tongue. I want to give that tongue enough area so that it's comfortable, and then it also provides me a guideline for building the facial overjet of the rim itself. Okay. Another thing that I use when I'm doing rim construction that I can recommend, and this tool here has been used in my laboratory forever. Anytime I make a rim, I use the Alma gauge as a method of standardizing my rim construction. A couple cool features are, first off, you can measure the amount of distance from the incisive papilla to the occlusal plane, but more importantly, what I use it for is I use it to mark, I don't know if you can see that, my overjet. And for a maxillary arch, it's generally between 7 and 8 millimeters forward of the incisive papilla. So by using this, I can trim that rim in accordance to that rule. Secondary feature, if you like, is that you can mark and you can outline your rim on the clear template. That gives you a record of what you sent the doctor, and then when you get it back, they'll have trimmed it, hopefully, and if so, you can place it back on and you can remark and you can see where the adjustments have been, and you can record, and you can also keep that for your records so that when you go to construct your setup, you can use those guidelines that are on the template. Of course, you have followed me on my YouTube channel, come to my courses or lectures, know that I use an occlusal template that's mounted to my articulator for these types of things. But if you don't want to do that and you're a person that's using a barn door hinge, this is a great way to keep yourself a record of following the doctor's prescribed tooth position, which will give you the facts needed when you're discussing a reset. And I'll leave it at that. But anyway, there's your rim construction. I polish it. I'll polish it with the foam polisher and get that ready, and that will go back out, and hopefully we will get back a nice impression with the records, and then we can proceed directly to our setup for evaluation. And again, this saves an appointment whenever you have a bad impression, a missed anatomic locations, and you know, you get pushback because it means we're going to have to take they're going to have another appointment in order to take a new impression. So by fabricating these, we can avoid that pushback by just suggesting, listen, you know, we can take an impression and you can take the records at the same time and trim the rim. And as I've told you earlier, this is an ideal way to get the case back in line again, where we have a good impression, and at the same time we won't lose an appointment because you had to ask for a new impression. So I call it Regitray, R-E-G-I-T-R-A-Y, Regitray, and I make this suggestion whenever I have a remiss impression. I hope this works. I hope this works for you, and it gives you another tool to place in your toolbox. And I hope some of the other little pearls, like the knobs on there and the way we trim them and the way I make spacers, can also be applied to your standard base plate and rim fabrication as well. If you like what you saw, on this video, please give me a like and please subscribe, because the more subscribers the merrier, and the more feedback, the more precise I can offer these different avenues of education. So again, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you again.